Hi, this is Dodger and you're watching my show.
3, 2, 1, ready, go!
It's almost Thanksgiving! I'm so excited. Thanksgiving is like the only holiday that my family gets mega into, and Sam's gonna be coming with me for the first time. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be amazing. We're gonna eat so much food, and I have so many gifts to make, don't tell anyone. But yeah, it's gonna be awesome, which unfortunately also means that I will be gone from Tuesday through Monday. So hopefully I'll be able to have, you know, at least one video going up every day while I'm gone, but if not, you know why. For our first piece of news, the Atari Game Over documentary is up on Xbox One. Now for those of you who don't know, this is basically the story of when Atari went insane and just buried a bunch of copies of E.T. It's real, that really happened. They found them, and that's basically what the documentary is like talking about that, how there was like a video game crash and all these things, and then also following them as they try to unearth all of these awful copies of the E.T. game. It is free, and apparently it's not just on Xbox One, it's just on Xbox Live. So if you have an Xbox with Xbox Live, you should be able to watch it no matter what. My favorite part, I think, is that the group that went out there to find all of these copies is now just, they're making so much money on weird Atari garbage that they found in the middle of New Mexico. So there you go, if you're a documentary buff like me and you love video games, then those two things can collide and become one, and it's amazing. Bungie is doing their best to get people into Destiny. Right now there is a trial version of the game where if you play it, then you can also transfer that character from your trial game into the real game. That might have been kind of a confusing way to say that. Basically, it's like, you play the trial, you create a character, you start playing the game, right? And then if you're like, wow, that was actually really fun, I'd actually like to purchase a Destiny to have it for myself, you can transfer your trial game character into the real game so that it's not like you wasted time playing the trial, right? Transferring the file between consoles is pretty straightforward. Like, if you played it on PS3, you can only transfer to a PS4. If you played it on Xbox 360, you can only transfer to an Xbox One, right? You can't go cross-family. It's like Romeo and Juliet. If you manage to transfer from PS3 to Xbox One, everyone dies at the end. Spoiler for anybody who doesn't know the end of Romeo and Juliet. Anyway, so yeah, that's an option. Activision takes care of the whole process of transferring all on its own, so you don't really have to do anything. It's just, you know, it's yet another way for them to be like, please come play Destiny. We got Iron Banner. You like Iron Banner? We like Iron Banner. Assassin's Creed Unity continues to be an asshole. That game has had so many issues. The number of like game-breaking bugs is kind of baffling to me. And yes, they've been working hard to fix it. They've been patching, they've been putting out all sorts of little like press releases being like, here's an issue, but we're fixing it. So in one of those press releases, they talked about a bug in which you literally can't get past the loading screen. So like you start up the game and then you hit continue and the game just like freezes and dies. Ubisoft put out a statement explaining how to get around this issue, and of course it's something ridiculous. If you have imported any friends into your contact list, or if you've prompted the game to do so, that's the problem. So if you could just like take a minute and get rid of all of your friends, that would be great. That would really fix the problem. I mean, I know the game is called Assassin's Creed Unity, but if you could like stop being united, that would be really amazing for us. I've said this multiple times. I said this on the podcast maybe 8,000 times because I was just so baffled by it all. The game hasn't changed that much, right? The game from like one Assassin's Creed to another hasn't really changed that much. How do you mess this one up so bad? I personally think that the Assassin's Creed world is interesting, but I think that it's also very banal. There are so many choices that have been made story-wise that are not very exciting. They're not very brave choices. They're not things that are going to push forward at all. So like, I literally have no reason to look past it and be like, I'm sure it's fine. Anyway, if you're angry at Assassin's Creed Unity for some reason, feel free to leave a comment, because I bet you would all have something to say. I'm sure plenty of you are playing Super Smash Bros. Right now. I'm actually shocked that as many of you are probably going to watch this video as you are, because really, you should just be playing Smash Bros. But as some Smash Bros. News to make it worth your time, apparently Mewtwo is going to be the only DLC in the game. There were lots of rumors, there was lots of discussion about like, well, if they're going to make Mewtwo DLC, obviously they're going to have lots of other characters be DLC. but this is apparently not the case. They've talked about this mostly as like an experiment. It takes a lot of work to balance a character, to create a character, to make sure that it meshes well with that world, especially when the game is already out, right? So yes, Mewtwo is going to be DLC, but they don't plan on making anything else as DLC. For some people, the response to that is, awesome. Cool, I'm not even gonna have to worry about blowing a bunch of money on Smash Brothers. And for everybody else, the response is, aw, no ice climbers? But at the same time, regardless of what they've said, right? The fact that they're saying Mewtwo is an experiment means that they're going to be looking at the data. They're going to see how many people took the time to buy both versions of the game so that they could get Mewtwo for free, and how many people are going to actively just buy Mewtwo once Mewtwo comes out as an actual buyable DLC. And that information is going to determine whether or not they do this sort of thing in the future. And it's like, how soon are you planning on making another Smash Brothers game, right? So if they're treating this as an experiment, that means that if the data turns out to be positive enough, I would not put it past them to be like, okay, well, baby, I mean, here you go. You don't conduct experiments unless you have some sort of an end goal for that experiment. What is your end goal, Nintendo? Why are you doing this? What are you going to do with that data? I would assume the only thing to do with the data, if it is positive enough for you, is to continue repeating the process and see what the response is.
But who knows, I'm just a young girl from Oregon, grew up on a farm, don't know the ways of the world.
I just think we shouldn't assume that Nintendo's out of the DLC game just yet. Game of Thrones Telltale game, ah! If you've been waiting for some information about the Telltale Game of Thrones game, then you are in luck because there is a trailer. Now, to be fair, the trailer is literally just Cersei Lannister's voice, like, talking about stuff. There is like a really quick clip of Tyrion, so that's fun. It's interesting because they are pulling a little bit away from that comic book style because it doesn't suit Game of Thrones, right? It suited Walking Dead and it suited, I was gonna say Wolf of Wall Street. It suited Wolf Among Us because those were both based off of comic books, right? But Game of Thrones is not a comic book. Game of Thrones is a very serious drama about political intrigue. So art style-wise, they decided to go a bit more realistic with it, although it's funny because it's so hard to go realistic nowadays with your graphics because everybody's in this weird race to be like, I made a game with even realisticer graphics. So with Telltale making this sort of a choice and being like, oh, let's pull a bit more toward that graphic realism, but not quite as far as everybody else, it winds up looking like an older game, which is really strange to me. Obviously, I'm still gonna play it because I'm really excited for it and I love Game of Thrones, but graphics-wise, it's really tricky right now to like make a choice like that and stick to it and have it not seem as though your game isn't as next gen. Not that they necessarily care if their game looks next gen, it's just they like to tell stories, right? They're very good at telling stories with these sort of QTE games, but that means that we spend a lot of time just looking at what's going on and really soaking in the graphics and the art direction and all of that. So maybe once I'm playing, I'll feel differently about it, but watching the trailer, I was like, meh. As a final bit of news, let's talk a little bit about Far Cry 4 DRM. So obviously with a game like Far Cry 4, a lot of people are gonna go, I don't wanna spend that much money, I'm just gonna pirate it. And a lot of people in the forums have been complaining about the FOV slider, and Alex Hutchinson eventually went to Twitter and said, yo dogs, if you're complaining about the FOV slider, it's because you pirated the game. The reason for this being, apparently, what they're claiming, is that they've had so much negative feedback with DRM that they didn't want to make that quite as heavy-handed. Instead, they put out the game without a usable FOV slider and then had a day one update that fixed it for the people who legitimately bought the game. Now here's where it gets all argumentative until the end of time. There are plenty of people who read this and say, that's brilliant. That's so cool. That's such an awesome way to do that so that, you know, the DRM isn't as big of an issue. The way they're dealing with piracy is through updates. And then there's everybody else who's saying, well, or the FOV slider was just broken and then they made it sound better than it was. Also, if you've been pirating games for a while, you probably know how to update the game anyway, regardless of the legitimacy of your purchase. But like for me, I want to believe. right? I want to be out there saying, that's a cool way to do that. That's a cool, non-invasive way to do that. Just have like a day one patch, a day one update that fixes a thing that breaks the game for other people. But then part of my heart says, but it didn't even break the game. Really? You know, it's not something that keeps those people from playing the game. It's something that makes it a bit uncomfortable for them. So I don't know, maybe that is what really happened. Maybe it isn't. Some people are saying the FOV slider doesn't work for them even though they got the day one patch. I would love to believe in a world where really invasive DRM just disappears, just isn't part of anybody's world ever again. But I realize that these people also spend so much of their lives trying to make these games and then have thousands of people that completely disregard their work and effort, right? And just like get the game for free and don't pay for it. And that sucks. And plenty of people say, well, if I like the game enough, I'll buy it anyway. But really? Will you? I used to say that. Did I actually buy the game later? No. Even with things where it's not a big deal, like I'll read scanlations of a manga and be like, it's fine because once it gets licensed, I'll buy it. I don't. Rule of thumb is, if you don't have to spend money, you probably won't spend money. Because right now, a lot of people don't have jobs. Right now, a lot of people aren't making a lot of money, but people still love games and people still want to play games and be part of the community. And so those sorts of choices are going to continue to be made. And I'm sure one day we'll figure out a better way to do it, but right now we don't have a better way to do it.